All right, joining us right now is the former Information Broadcasting Minister, Mr. Manish Tewari. In fact, Mr. Tewari was also the minister when a paradigm shift took place as far as the ratings mechanism is concerned. Mr. Tewari, thank you so much for joining us right here on NDTV. I'm not going to press very hard for your comment on individuals because I feel that this is a malaise which goes beyond individuals in question as far as an FIR is concerned. So unless, of course, you want to talk about it, I'm not going to press hard. But what do you think of the manner in which this TRP racket has been busted by the Mumbai police?
Well, Sanket, as you rightly pointed out, the malaise is as old as the liberalization of the broadcasting space in India and goes all the way back to 1996 when the first ratings started to be generated. The concern has been there ever since. In fact, if I recall correctly from the top of my head, Dr. Prannoy Roy wrote about it extensively in his book. In fact, if I do recall correctly, NDTV had mounted a very serious legal challenge, both in India and in New York, to the entire ratings paradigm.
Yes.
So therefore, this entire system, which is completely and absolutely opaque, is troublesome, and that is putting it mildly. In fact, in the January of 2014, responding to the concerns from the broadcast industry, I had put an overarching legal architecture in place. We had put policy guidelines which rating agencies are supposed to follow after approval by the Union Cabinet. Subsequently, those guidelines were challenged in the Delhi High Court. Some parts of it were stayed temporarily, but the rest of the guidelines were held to be in order. And under those circumstances, the only agency which was providing or generating ratings at that point in time decided to get out of the business. And the Broadcast Audience Research Council, which was recommended by the TRAI going as far back as 2008, and then there was the Amit Mitra Committee, then the TRAI re-recommended in 2012, and in 2013, Mr. Rahul Khullar, who was then the chairperson of the TRAI, actually threatened me in writing that if I were not to act on his recommendations within 2 months, the TRAI would step in and do that. It's unfortunate that those policy recommendations or those policy guidelines were not robustly policed by my predecessor, by my successors. Otherwise, the TRP ratings opacity would have been cleaned out.
No, Mr. Tewari, so you're basically saying that the steps that you initiated in having this new system in place was not followed through, not upgraded, not updated, and the opacity only increased, because of which we see a scam unfold. The original system was foolproof. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the original system was flawed. The original system was completely flawed, and that's why the industry was complaining about it constantly. And that's why, as I earlier pointed out, NDTV had challenged it both in India and in New York, if I remember correctly. Dr. Roy has written extensively in his book. So therefore, the system was broken. And that's why a need was felt that you need to put a regulatory
Mr. Tewari, when I am asking you this question about the original system, I mean the original system that you put in place, the BARC system. Do you think that was foolproof? Because now it's very clear it was not.
Well, the Broadcast Audience Research Council was recommended, as I earlier pointed out, by the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India repeatedly from 2008 onwards. There was a feeling that if there is an industry body in which all the stakeholders come together in order to create a ratings agency, that perhaps would be far, far more credible and transparent than the system which existed earlier. And so therefore, the Broadcast Audience Research Council came up during the tenure of my successors. I think possibly Mr. Javadekar and then the late Mr. Arun Jaitley. And of course, the policy recommendations or the policy structure was put in place when I was the minister in the January of 2014. But had the BARC system been more rigorously monitored by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, and when aberrations were pointed out by the broadcast industry from time to time, if steps would have been taken in order to rectify or to take cognizance of those complaints, I'm sure we would not have seen the situation that we are seeing today.
So, Mr. Tewari, you're saying a police complaint was not required. I mean, had the central government, and which is the nodal agency here, the Information Broadcasting Ministry or the TRAI, any of these agencies done their job, then a police complaint would not have been required. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. The Information and Broadcasting Ministry is the licensor. They have licensing powers. And so therefore, if they did detect or if there were complaints with regard to a particular television channel or a group of channels trying to allegedly game the TRP system, if they would have acted, obviously, we would not have come to such a pass. But Sanket, there is a bigger problem. And the bigger problem is that the revenue models in the broadcast industry are completely and absolutely flawed. Globally, the revenue model is 60% subscription and 40% advertising. In India, the revenue model, unfortunately, is what I was trying to correct, even through the process of digitization, which we implemented in 2012 and 2013, was to correct the revenue models of the broadcast industry. So therefore, if you are 100% dependent on advertising, and the advertising is measured by a spurious currency called television or people's meters, which are only 40,000 in number. Earlier, they were only 25,000, and they are supposed to extrapolate what 190 million television homes, which is 900 million people who watch cable and satellite, what their preferences are. Obviously, the system is absolutely flawed. And riding on this is a 40,000 crore advertising pie. And therefore, it is extremely important for the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, for the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, which is the regulator of the broadcast industry, insofar as the technical side is concerned, or as far as the business side is concerned, to have been extremely
Let me ask you my final question, Mr. Tewari. You are a member parliament also. First of all, no government interference or political interference must be there as far as television broadcast is concerned. This is the freedom of speech which we are talking about. But as a member parliament, do you think that the currency needs to change? Right now, we seem to be having a quantitative currency to measure ratings. Do you think it should become a qualitative currency of measuring ratings, something like a national credibility rating? Judge the channel on the basis of credibility of the news, not pure numbers.
Sanket, unfortunately, I would like to very strongly disagree with you.
Okay.
I think the self-regulation is a complete sham. So therefore, this entire paradigm of self-regulation, which the broadcasting industry touts, is a chimera. It has completely failed. So self-regulation has to be embedded in a statutory framework for there to be robust oversight. And insofar as what should be the currency in order to measure the reach of a television channel, I think that's the subject of a much, much deeper discussion rather than a 1-minute response in television.
But do you think the time is now to start talking about it, to take this debate forward?
Well, in the sense, this is an extremely serious issue because this television rating points, or the TRP imbroglio, as I call it, or the tyranny of the TRPs, as I used to call it earlier, has completely vitiated the media environment of this country. And that's why, you saw this Bollywood soap opera play itself out for 2 months on news and current affairs channels when COVID-19, the Chinese aggression, the state of the Indian economy should have been something which should have been engaging the attention of those who claim to be or who are licensed as news and current affairs channels.
All right. All right. Mr. Manish Tewari, thank you so much. But you didn't answer my question whether you are going to take this up, because see, ultimately this has to be a law. Should we be seeing a qualitative analysis of ratings and a credibility ratings rather than this quantitative analysis?
Well, Sanket, you've raised a point, and I would definitely apply myself to it. I have written very extensively on this issue over the past 5 years, and I didn't want to give you an off-the-bat response that A is better than B. You know, I think you flagged an issue which is germane, that how credibility of a channel should be measured and how that should be taken into account by the advertisers when they decide their advertising spend. That's a fair point, but I think it requires deeper thought and deeper deliberation.
Okay. Mr. Manish Tewari, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanket.
All right, let's just stop for a short break.